Today, I have with me a guest that has an interesting backstory of what brought him into the field of health and nutrition and working with clients on their health and wellness goals. Today's guest, his backstory includes losing 80 pounds, I believe. He was an obese teenager, and then from there, he went into his education for health and physical education, a master's degree in nutrition. He's a Ph.D., holding a doctorate degree. Dr. Derek Alessi became interested in the field of fitness training at an early age. As I mentioned, he struggled with obesity as a teenager and determined that he needed to lose some weight and entered a bodybuilding show, which I found very interesting because, as my listeners know, I did several bodybuilding shows, did my last one 2 years ago. So that will be an interesting story to dive into. Dr. Derek is the CEO of Strength Genesis, which is a company that provides ethically sourced products, and he owns and operates Dr. Derek Health and Fitness, which is a private practice and personal training facility for adults in the New York area, East Amherst, I believe. He is a published author and health, fitness, and lifestyle contributor for USA Today. He's the host of weekly TV shows on NBC Cleveland and NBC in Buffalo, New York. And he's been featured in national print media, including Burn Fitness for Women, and Iron Man magazine. Dr. Derek, welcome to the show.
Hi, Carol. Thanks for having me here, and I'm excited to talk about the world of health and fitness.
I am too. There is so much to talk about, and I want to dive into all things. But tell me a little bit. You lost 80 pounds, a substantial amount of weight, especially as a youth, as a young man. How did you do that? What's the story behind that? Did you do it in a healthy way, or was it a crash diet and you discovered the health and fitness part of it later? How did that come about?
Well, the answer is it's because I wanted to be a dentist. It makes no sense whatsoever when I just say it like that, but I wanted to be a dentist. And when people ask me, well, why did you want to be a dentist? And there's two reasons. Number one is because I had an uncle that was a successful dentist. But number two is because I was heavy. I was obese, and exercise, fitness, it was the furthest thing from my mind. In fact, to this day, I've never been able to do a somersault, a handstand, a cartwheel, any of those things. Heck, I can't even touch my toes. So that's where I started from. In the process at undergrad, I had to take some prerequisites of this thing called exercise science, which in the 1980s was still a pretty new field. Not too many people knew anything about it. I certainly didn't know anything about it. So when I started taking these prerequisite classes in exercise science, it spoke to me. I fell in love with it. Not because I thought I was going to create a different career. It's because I needed to personally do it. And I didn't even know exercise had a science to it. I thought if you wanted to get in better shape, you had to jog or do some aerobics or something like that, or bodybuild. I wasn't sure what it was. But it spoke to me, and I thought, oh my goodness, this is still along a science-based background. It still would help me go to dental school. So I jumped into it. I really found it interesting. And as I got deeper and deeper into it, I thought, I really should be changing my body and not just wasting this time. Growing up with both sides of the family from Italy. So, yes, all of the Italian delicacies from both sides were not lost on me, but not knowing anything about health and fitness. So I jumped into it, got into it, lost a bunch of weight because I did have some things working for me. Number one is I was young. Number two is I was a male, so I had a faster metabolism. I could build more muscle. And I changed my body, and it was transformative. That's essentially how I got into this. So when people say, did you always know you're going to be a nutritionist and exercise scientist? The answer is no. I was going to dental school. So that is what led me down this path. It's been 35 years in school, but 30 years I've been in private practice helping people improve their health and fitness.
I just love it. I'm smiling because when you were talking about the Italian side, my husband's Italian, so we often will talk about all the ants. I forget how many there are, like 8 ants. And
Endless ants. Endless.
I remember the first time I met his family, and I was in my teens, and they brought out a cake for everybody. I'll never forget it. It's like, oh, here's a cake for Carol, the new bride of Mike, and here's a cake. It's Aunt Carol's birthday and Aunt Vera's birthday. And I just remember all of the food and how everything was centered around food, and community really was linked up to that. So I enjoyed that. Now you lost this 80 pounds and you went through this whole transformation. And I think that that is really key for a lot of us. We've had many of us in this field have had our own backstory of how we got here. And I would say very few of us went, oh yeah, this is what I'm going to be doing when I'm 40, 50, 60. Now, you did a bodybuilding show and you decided wasn't for you. What happened there?
Nair. I had to use Nair to take all the hair off my body.
Oh,
So Nair stopped me from ever wanting to compete again. Honestly, I don't know how women do it. I was like this chemical burn over my body for weeks. That was one of the things. The other thing too is I didn't enjoy being on stage. I didn't like the feeling of it myself. I didn't like being in a male bikini. I knew it wasn't for me per se. I did respect a lot of the training and the principles of it, and a lot of it can be applied at a different level to even what we do today, working with people mainly over 45 years of age. So I did have to try it, and I could say that I was up on stage and went through that whole experience, but never again, and never any more Nair in my life either.
people don't realize. I mean, I feel like I should do an episode on what actually happens getting ready for a show, the tanning experience. And I don't know, the whole thing can be rather humiliating in a way because you're just stripped of your privacy altogether.
Carol, no doubt, no doubt. And I should say this too, going along that path. Before Nair, do you remember the Epa lady?
Yeah,
The
yeah.
Epilady. So my mother had an Epilady, which was this kind of razor with this big coil
Yes.
that would try to
Uh-huh.
grab the hair and yank it out by the. So I didn't know. I was like 19, 20 years of age. I just took this Epilady, put it right on my chest, and it
Oh,
got stuck. It got stuck on my chest. So I had to get scissors to cut out the Epilady that was full of this glob of hair before I even got to the Nair.
oh,
So yeah,
no.
no, there are stories behind it.
There are stories. Yes, I've got them too. Oh, that's so funny. I love it. Now, I want to go into more of the health and fitness. We did the bodybuilding show. This took you down a different trajectory of going to school and getting your doctorate in physical fitness and in health. And then you added on the nutrition. Looking at where we're at as a country right now, it just seems like we pour all this money into health and there's more and more information out there. Like I pick up Instagram and my head's spinning with all the information. But yet, in many ways, the statistics tell us we're unhealthier than ever. Why do you think this is?
Yeah, no doubt about it. In fact, if you look at obesity in 1980, which wasn't that long ago, it was 10% for adults in this country. Now it's at 50%. So astronomical rise, and there's no lack of fitness equipment. There's no lack of gymnasiums, health clubs. There's no lack of diets. There's no lack of anything, right? So when you take a look at it, we've changed as a society. Obviously, there was more manual labor. We were more of a farming community. Foods have changed. Our thought process has changed. The speed has changed. And also, too, we want things instantly. So I like to attribute everything in fitness almost like going to school. So if in school, if my grades weren't good, I might have one of two different paths to take. I could go to a teacher and say, what should I do to improve my grades? Or I could say, you know what? I'm going to cram. I got a midterm coming up. I got a final coming up. I'm going to cram. I'm going to stay up 2, 3 nights in a row. I'm going to try to cram everything in, and maybe I could pull off a good grade. Maybe I can't. And I will get something temporary. And I see a lot of people doing that right now. They're cramming. They're thinking, how do I lose 20 pounds? How do I lose 40 pounds? What kind of diet do I have to be on? Should I work out every day? Should I take Ozempic or some other GLP-1 drug? What should I do? But they're not changing themselves as a student, which would be the better path. You go to the teacher says, okay, we have to do the right classwork. We have to do the right homework, which in our situation would be exercise and nutrition. And we have to evaluate it with criteria over a consistent period of time. And if you do that, if you develop that type of behavior and mindset, your grade point average in school will improve. But if you do it for health and fitness, so will your body composition, so will your health, so will your energy, so will your movement. All of those things will improve as well. It's identical in every way to school.
That's a good way to put it. It's a really good analogy. And I think it's natural as human beings, we want that. Our brains are kind of wired to take the easiest path. I think people don't realize that it's what's going to, require the least amount of energy to get from A to Z. And it's a very natural thing. And so we're kind of always fighting against that quick fix. Now, what do you make of Ozempic and the GLPs? Do you feel there's a place for them? Do you feel they're overused? What are your thoughts on those?
So, like the answer to most questions is, of course, it depends. For the general population, I wouldn't do it. I wouldn't jump to it for so many reasons. Once again, we're trying to create the right habits, we're trying to create the right behaviors, and it should be something that's consistent, just like school. For at-risk populations or extreme at-risk populations, it may have its place in there, but it can't be done by itself. It has to be done with other things. Cognitive behavioral therapy probably being number one. If you're not changing the mindset, all you're doing is creating a separate chemical dependency. So a person, if they even do see some weight loss or some success, they'll think, but I can't do it now without this drug. So you could look at it from many different angles. Obviously, the US is ripe for this whole thing. It's funny because if you look at GLP-1s and Ozempic and Wegovy and everything else worldwide, the rest of the world doesn't even care about it. That's why it's $59 a month in France right now. That's why
Really?
it's $71 in Germany. They don't care. They don't want it. In the
Wow.
US, $1,200 because of how our mindset is, right? We don't want to go to school. We don't want to change our behaviors. We don't want to go to class. We don't want to do these things. So we want something that's more instant gratification. So we're ripe for the whole Ozempic movement, and that's why it's been so expensive, and that's why so many people have jumped into trying it.
I honestly did not know that about I hadn't even thought of the other countries using this or what they paid. I just kind of assumed it was across the board. So that's really interesting. I know from having traveled to Europe, they move. They move, they walk. There's so much walking that you do. And so I can see where the mindset would be different about food, about lifestyle and just really all of it. So I can get that entirely. So very interesting information. And I agree with you. You've got to change the behavior. What do you think for cognitive behavior? What do you think is the number one mindset shift that people have to make to get healthy?
So it's, of course, always easier said than done, right? So we're creatures and we're conditioned from our years on being on this planet. So it's one thing for me to say to somebody, hey, look, you have to decide and you have to start changing your mindset. It's easy to say that, but if you're a person that's had decades of bad behavior and a different mindset, it's going to take time. I think in this country, we're not recognizing the mind as being a muscle as much as we think of muscles being a muscle. For instance, you go to the gym and you could think, well, if I start working my muscles, I could start improving them over time and they'll respond. True. The brain works the same way. Now, clearly, the school systems don't teach mindset at all. They should, and hopefully at some point they will. But when you start having that shift, when you start working on yourself, when you start improving you, in why you're important to yourself, you'll start cutting through some of the fog. You'll start seeing that you are important, that you are, especially to yourself, you are worth the effort. So when somebody comes to see me the first time, my first question is, are you worth it? Now, I don't mean to me, I mean, are you worth it to yourself?
Right.
To start looking at this and doing that is hard work. So a lot of the hard work that has to be done has nothing to do with lifting a finger or anything physical. It starts with how you think about yourself. So if I can get a client thinking, I am important to me, I am worth it, I am going to improve my self-image, my self-concept, how I speak to myself, then they'll find that the strategies will work so much better. Now we're not cramming for an exam. Now we really are becoming good students.
You're speaking my language. I'm running a 7-day challenge right now, and we started with mindset. And I really refer to it as the foundation. I can hand somebody, okay, here's a great meal plan. Here's all the foods you should eat. Here's all the exercises. But then if they can't implement, what good does that do? And so we've got to really start with that thought process. Recently went alcohol free. Not that I was a heavy drinker or anything like that, but I just decided it wasn't good for my health and no more. My sister passed away recently from Alzheimer's. And I mean, who's to say what was the cause? I'm not saying it was alcohol, but I just decided, you know what, I don't need this. But long story short, I had to change some thoughts concerning that glass of wine that I wanted to have in the evening. I had to ask myself, does that really relieve stress? Or is that just some story I've told myself for decades? Does it really taste good? I had to break it all down. And that was key to changing my habit.
Yeah, I think you hit the nail on the head. That's exactly it. When you start looking at it like that, you start answering some tough questions. You start doing some hard work. No, our bodies, of course, will do what our mind tells it to do. If you tell yourself, well, I can't relax without alcohol, guess what? You can't relax without alcohol. And you can build a very compelling story to why you should be taking an alcohol. So I think it's so common. Now, mind you, Carol, you've had all the other really great behaviors. You've been exercising like crazy. You've been eating properly for years, decades. So you have all these other behaviors. So then you look back and say, well, if this is the only thing that I do, once again, we start over rationalizing. You start saying, well, I do
Yes.
all these other great things. Of course, I could, maybe not do something great over here. So we're a creature of over rationalizing, even to our own chagrin. So you do have to be super careful with how you talk to yourself. And once again, I would be a huge fan if this was introduced in our lives, probably during our formative years. I think looking back at it for myself, having some very tough middle school years, being very heavy, being heavier than my teachers, being 50 to 60 pounds heavier than my friends. I wish mindset was there. It would have been so helpful and it would have saved a lot of time and a lot of aggravation. So yes, I'm a huge fan of the mindset being number one, even before you get into strategy.
I agree with you. I don't talk about it very much, but I had about 2 years in high school where I was overweight. I didn't have 80 pounds to lose, but I would say about 40, and it was enough to really affect my self-esteem. And I remember how I got it off, and it was not in a good way. It was like, oh, I'll drink diet soda and eat salads. That's what people do when they want to lose weight. And how I wish there had been something there, that mindset work to really start with, because I just dove in and did this crash diet, and that's how I did it. So love that you are leading off with that. Now, when somebody comes to you, they come to your practice, and let's say you have a woman and she's maybe just gone through menopause, she's struggling, the menopause weight gain. How would you start with her? Where would you start? What would be the steps for her to lose weight or to get into shape?
When I first meet with somebody in a consultation, I'm going to go through a bunch of different tests and evaluations. I want to get a body composition. I want to see what we're dealing with, how many pounds of fat, how many pounds of lean. I want to take a look at the most recent metabolic panel. I'm looking for different markers such as glucose, hemoglobin A1C. I'm looking at liver function. I'm looking at kidney function. I'm looking at liver triglyceride levels. I want to get a big picture of it. I want to see if they're on any medications, and if so, which ones and how long they've been on those, and do a full health history and orthopedic evaluation. From there, after getting all that information, I want to get a little bit into their goals or their wants and desires. What are you hoping for? And I really want to get the truth out of them too. Because a lot of people will say to me, I know I have a lot of weight to lose. I don't care about that. I just want to be healthy. I want them to give me everything. I want them to say, you know what? I do want to lose the weight because I'm sick of looking at it. I do want to be healthier. I want to move better, feel better, live longer, be around for my kids or grandkids. I want them to give me everything because just like a teacher in school, I need to evaluate where they're starting from. And then from there, based upon all of that, I want to give them a grade and then show them what better grades could look like. And then after that, after showing them what the better grades can look like, I really put it back in their court and say, which do you want? And I'll build this around what your goal is. So I'm going to let them choose their own grade. I want to be a C. I want to be a B. I want to be an A. I want to be an A plus. I want to be the valedictorian. I want to be in the Olympics. So whatever it is, I want them to tell me what it is. By the way, not many people are telling me they want to be in the Olympics, but I do want to know what their goal is so I can start building a program around them because I'll give them slightly different information at different stages. Ultimately, it's about breaking it all down, looking at their grades, and then having them tell me what type of student they want to become.
That's really important because I know when I first started coaching women and I was in that bodybuilding world, I had that tendency to want to give them what I was doing, like a prescription. And I think that's just normal. It's like, oh, this worked for me. This is great. I can't wait to share it with everybody. And then I found out most of them don't want this. They just they want their clothes to fit and they want to be able to pick up their kids or grandkids, stay mobile and stay healthy and longevity. And they're really not looking at bodybuilding type goals. So I know I had to take a step back and say, those are my goals and not theirs.
I made that mistake too. In fact, even to this day, I have a team of about 11 that work for me right now, and many of them are younger exercise science or they're fitness competitors. And I will jump all over them and down their back if they start getting into what they do, because this has
Yes.
nothing to do with them at all. It's easy to do that, though, especially when you are younger. I do understand it. Once again, I made that mistake too. You start rating everything based upon what you're doing. But keep in mind, if you were in college, you would be studying at a certain level. And if somebody was just in first or second grade, you couldn't possibly give them the same coursework. It's the same type of thing, right? So, an analogy that I use all the time is somebody will say, hey, I want to go to the gym every day and I want to eat pure keto forever. Cool. So, you're basically telling me you want to do calculus, but you're not good at addition and subtraction. You're not going to last long in calculus. It's the same type of thing. You have to build it up just like grades at school.
And another good analogy. So speaking of keto, do you have certain nutrition protocols that you feel are best for people? Because I was looking on your website and you have like three pillars. You have the right exercise, the right diet, and then active management. So let's kind of dive into it a little bit. What is the right diet?
Yeah, so we do have those principles, and I always lean towards trying to lower blood glucose and insulin levels. That is paramount no matter who it is. Now, principles work for everybody, but specifics are for the person. For instance, during the course of a week, Monday through Friday, I might not have any carbs other than vegetables. And people will say, wait a second, you're going all week long without any carbs other than vegetables? Yes, but I'm not prescribing that for my general client. I'm not asking them to do that. I'm only giving that as an example. So I'm always going to try to lower their blood glucose, because if we can lower their blood glucose, we can lower their insulin. If we lower their insulin, not only will they drop a lot of body fat, but also it'll get rid of the inflammation of their vessel walls around the heart, around the brain, and also in their joints. So if they have knee problems, shoulder problems, hip problems, wrist problems, feet problems, all of those start becoming better with less inflammation. So that is what I would put as a pillar of the right diet. On the Strength Genesis side, the supplement company, it's built around the same thing. How can we give the right nutrition at the same time, keeping blood sugar levels lower so a person is going to be more easily dropping body fat or reducing inflammation. So all the products are kind of built around dropping body fat and getting rid of that inflammation as well.
A great approach because women, when they, as you know, they go through menopause, that estrogen drops and then that insulin resistance can start to creep up. I even experienced it myself, even though I wasn't overweight, but I remember having blood panels run when I was, about 50 and being a little bit alarmed at these levels starting to creep up. So I think that's an excellent approach. Now tell me about your company. Is it just supplements? Is it food and supplements?
It's food and supplements. The majority of what we have, though, is food. Our most popular and longest running supplements or products really are food products. We have this salad dressing that's called Origin Keto Salad Dressing, which has literally been on fire the last 4 months. We have not been able to produce enough of it. Now, people say, well, wait a second, a salad dressing, why is that so special? Well, it is a keto salad dressing. There's no carbs, there's no sugar at all. But it's one of the only salad dressings in existence that's made from 100% extra virgin olive oil. Now, some people will say, well, that's not true. I can go to the grocery store and I see that there's olive oil salad dressings. True, but they always add to it some canola oil or soybean
Yes.
oil. And in the process of doing so, you're cheapening the oil and you have to refrigerate it after opening. So our product doesn't have to be refrigerated at all. You could keep it right in the pantry, right in the cupboard, and there's no soybean oil or canola oil to go bad. So that is probably our biggest seller currently, but our biggest of all time. And what I consider the greatest cooking oil is Australian cold-pressed macadamia nut oil. Super healthy, super high smoke point. It doesn't break down until well over 500 degrees. And lastly, tastes rich and buttery. So the taste is phenomenal, very durable, and even healthier from an omega-3 standpoint than even olive oil, which is saying a lot.
Mm. It's interesting because my coach, when I was bodybuilding, that was a part of my protocol, was to take a tablespoon of macadamia oil. I think it was like he had me doing it maybe 2 or 3 times a day. And he said, this is going to help your skin because, when you're leaning down, you're losing that much body fat that quickly. And you're an older athlete, the skin can't keep up with the body fat loss. And so that was one of the things that they would do. What are you kind of touched on it, but the health benefits of macadamia oil?
Yeah, it's like the greatest oil in the world that nobody's really ever tried or heard of. When I first heard of macadamia nut oils about 10 years ago, do you remember the author Tim Ferriss? And he wrote The
Yes.
4 Hour Body? In there, he went on and on and on about this new olive oil. And what he was describing was Australian macadamia nut oil, of how the profile was that better of olive oil. And olive oil's not a great cooking oil because it does break down to 350 degrees. And most cooking is done above 350 degrees, whereas this macadamia nut oil, once again, it's super high smoke point. I brought it up to 620 degrees before and it hasn't broken down. So the omega-3 and 9 profile, which reduces cellular inflammation, is very plentiful inside this cold-pressed macadamia nut oil from Australia. So using Tim as an example, I looked into it, I bought some, loved it. I started getting more and more and more from my clients. They loved it. I started having trouble getting more supply for it, so I contacted the refinery in Australia and they told me that they lost their U.S. distributor. They asked me if I wanted to be that. I told them no. I'm not a distributor. I don't distribute to supermarkets and everything else. However, they did talk to me about buying a lot of it. I thought that it would come in bottles. It did not. It came in metric ton containers. So all of a sudden, I got into the world of importing, which I wanted no part of. But nonetheless, I wanted the oil so badly and I couldn't get it anywhere else. I went through 19 different versions of it just to get it. And nowadays, we bring in about 300 metric tons a year. It's the one somebody starts taking Australian macadamia nut oil and they start using it, it becomes their new favorite oil. For all of the things that you just mentioned, great for the skin, great for the hair, great for your nails, but also super healthy for your heart and brain. The taste is phenomenal. You can drink it off of a
It's
spoon
good.
and even healthier than olive oil. So macadamia nut oil is really harvested from 3 places, South Africa, Australia, and you can get some from Hawaii. The profile of omega-3, 7s, and 9s, which is the healthy profiles, are highest in cold processed, which means it's processed at a cold temperature. They don't heat up the oil to extract it, from Australia. Number 2, when you taste them all side by side, there is no comparison whatsoever. The Australian tastes considerably better. The South African tastes the worst, and Hawaiian is somewhere in between. So for those 2 reasons, I was hooked. And that was the only one I wanted to cook with. So if you think about your eggs, meat, vegetables, I even have a 12-year-old daughter that bakes with it. It is so delicious. You won't want to use any other oil.
It is delicious. I remember that I could just take it, in a spoon and it tasted so good. But you've listed benefits I wasn't even aware of. I thought, okay, I'm just taking this for my skin, my hair, my nails, all of those things. But the benefits for the heart, for example, and inflammation, I mean, such a hot topic that's been bringing down inflammation in our bodies.
Yeah, and it really even goes further than that. You can talk about how when you take in a good omega-3 fat, it hits your dopamine receptors and you're not going to crave as much. So it decreases the craving of sugar and carbs. Also, too, it's ridiculously good for your vessel walls. It keeps them very soft and supple and pliable, which is fantastic. So all of that. And then lastly, fantastic for diabetics too, because it makes you more sensitive to the insulin release inside your body. So all of those things are fantastic. I can't recommend it for cooking any more than that. And if you don't currently cook, you could take it off of a spoon as you did before too. The taste is delicious. But I always try to encourage people to cook because I think that's a very good habit that many people got away from in this generation that I'm going to always tell them, look back at it, see
Yes.
what you can do with your own cooking.
I struggle with that one with clients. People don't cook anymore. It's very rare, very rare. And I get it. They're busy and they're working all day or they have kids or grandkids and I get it. But boy, it's really a necessity to be able to prepare your food for success.
Yeah, I think so. And I think it can be relatively simple too. So if somebody says, well, I don't cook, okay, well, can you make eggs? Because that is cooking. So you could be scrambling eggs, you could be making an omelet, something very simple, very easy. It doesn't have to be overly complex. Can you use a grill? If you can put food on a grill, you are doing some cooking. So all of those things can be simple. It doesn't have to be 27 steps of Italian or French cuisine. It can be pretty simple. We always say 4 steps or less in a lot of the recipes that we give out at Strength Genesis to try to make it super simple.
Yeah, what I find is women a lot of times complicate things. So they think meal prep and they think of what they've seen, say on Instagram or TikTok, all the little containers, all perfect with, batch cooking. And I don't do that. So we cook extra of whatever. So we grill up extra salmon, extra steak, whatever it is we're having. And then that goes into what I call my drawer, with it. Nobody's allowed to touch my drawer because it's got my food in it. And then, maybe I have some veggies and, whatever I'm having for a carbohydrate, and that's it. It's simple. It's not complicated at all. I just think people tend to build it up to be something that it's more than.
Yeah, no, there's no doubt about it. You're absolutely right. And also, too, what they don't realize is cooking, just like mindset, just like training, just like nutrition, once again, it's a muscle. The
Mm.
longer you do it, the better you get at it. Really, the less you have to prepare than ever before because you're better at doing it when you do it. So all of those things become easier with time. So if somebody asks me about meal prep, if somebody's just starting on a fitness program, I would want them to try to do some of it because it's going to reinforce and do good behaviors. But the longer they do it, the easier they'll find that process to be.
No, I agree. And we're back to that mindset because if somebody's saying, I don't like to cook or I can't cook, you're defeated before you ever pick up the pan and try to cook. It's just sending that message to your brain of, oh, we can't do this. And I do find it to be one of those stumbling blocks for a lot of the women that I work with. Now, with exercise, you also have the right exercises pillar on what is the right exercise.
When it comes to the right exercise, I do want to look at somebody's orthopedic conditions. So often somebody over the age of 45 will say, I can't exercise or I shouldn't go to the gym. I have a bad knee. I have a bad back. I have a bad shoulder. I have something. I have an orthopedic issue or problem. And my doctor said, don't do anything. Okay. The whole study of physical therapy is about trying to erase and overcoming imbalances. It's about making that weakness a strength. And that's the key. So if somebody wants to lean back on extremely outdated and old information of I'm in pain, I shouldn't do anything, that goes against the entire field and principles of physical therapy in and of itself. Secondly, we have 639 muscles in the body. Even if you have a bad joint, I think we could find something else we could do. We have a lot of other options. So I'm a fan of always trying to regain muscle tissue that we lost due to the years of aging and atrophy. So anybody, whether they're 45, 65, 85, the oldest person I ever worked with was 97, we could still help to regain and rebuild some of the muscle that we lost over the years as long as the program is built around their orthopedic conditions. So that is what I consider as the building block in the start of the right exercise. Let's recoup some strength. Let's watch out for the joints. Let's make a weakness a strength. And if we do so, not only will you move better, but you're going to burn more calories because you're going to have more metabolism, more muscle tissue. So that's the right exercise.
Amen to that. I was telling you off camera that I had a rotator cuff surgery just last week, and then I had a spinal surgery last summer. And I actually prepared and trained for both. I worked the muscles as much as I could. I worked them from every angle. I really watched my nutrition. I made sure my protein was adequate, and I fared quite well. I mean, the back surgery was successful, and I was back in the gym relatively quickly compared to what they expected. And then with the shoulder, even the doctor said I should not have been able to get my arm over my head because it was rotator cuff. I could get my arm over my head because I continued to work the surrounding muscles. So I agree with you 100%. How do you feel about the advice? There is a lot of advice right now in the space. I see this on Instagram. There's somebody I follow, and I won't mention her name, but I actually really like her a lot. She's very researched and science based. And she's encouraging women as they go through menopause to lift very heavy. Now, when I was 50, yes, I was able to do that. But now at 63, I have to be a lot more careful. I find that I'm more vulnerable to injury. How do you feel about that advice of lifting as heavy as possible?
It depends where somebody is in their experience level. If I have a new person, somebody that's not done any training before, has very low experience, no, I don't want them doing CrossFit programs. I don't want them doing powerlifting programs. I don't encourage it. They're not ready for it yet. So once again, back to the school analogy, if I have a first grader, I can't treat them like a 12th grader or a college student. I just can't. The risk of injury is too high. It's too great. If somebody's more advanced, I might be able to get some more out of them. But the real question is, how do I get a first grader to second grade? How do I get a second grader to third grade? So we do have to change the variables of the workout. Increasing the weight load is one of those variables. Doing more repetitions or more sets is a different one. Changing the exercise sequence or even the picking different exercises is yet another one. Changing the rest interval, increasing the volume. There's so many different ways to start improving them, all of which could eventually lead to more and more weight load that a person's able to do. It just won't start immediately. So although I do respect the information and I do agree, it depends who we're working with in order to get there.
Yeah, not everyone is blessed with that ability to continue to lift, well into these senior years, or as they age, they might have to dial it back a little bit. So for instance, with me, deadlifts are out of the question. I've tried them every which way. It just doesn't work for me anymore. So I've had to find other ways to stimulate the muscles. Just like you said, I change the sets, the reps, the volume. I work with a lot of volume, time under tension, any creative thing I can think of, because not everybody, we age differently. Our joints, some people might have knee problems as they age, some people have hip problems, and some of it's genetic. So not everybody's blessed with that ability to continue to lift that heavy well into those years.
Yeah, and also too, I can't emphasize this enough. You need help to get started and get going. Now, we're having this conversation, and it's easy to do that when you've been a personal trainer, you've been an exercise scientist, you've been in the field for 30 years. Let's say, though, that you weren't. Let's say that you're 62 years of age, you never did anything before when it came to a standardized weight training program. The problem is that person thinks, before I ask for any help, let me just go to the gym, try to figure some things out on my own and go from there. I understand what you're saying, but please don't take any disrespect to this. You're not qualified. You are not qualified in any way, shape, or form to determine anything regarding your workout. You just haven't learned it yet. You don't necessarily know. Just like in school, I can't, as a first grader, go to a college professor and say, let me tell you how I should be learning. That doesn't make sense. It's the same thing too with your body. So if we're dealing with injury, if we're dealing with lack of experience, I'm going to highly encourage getting help. Maybe it's a physical therapist, maybe it's a personal trainer, maybe it's an exercise physiologist. It does, though, need to be some legitimate help to make sure that you are doing the right thing without the risk of more injury.
Very important. I agree with you, because I do see a lot of people, they go to the gym and maybe they've watched something on YouTube, and then I'm watching them try to recreate what they've watched on YouTube, and I'm like, "Oh my gosh, this person's going to get injured." And they're, like you said, they're kind of skipping those steps. They're going right from kindergarten over to senior year of high school with some of this exercise. And I've even seen, I don't like saying it, but I've seen trainers do it sometimes where you look and you go, They're not ready for that."
Yeah, it is hard to watch that sometimes. I'm a golfer and I like to look at golf too. It's the same type of thing. If you see somebody that's a beginning golfer, they'll typically say, I'm not going to get any lessons yet. I'm just going to go to the range and try to figure some things out on my own. Okay, so you're going to put a lot of bad habits into the beginning of your golf swing. Don't start that way. Get some legitimate help. Now, are different golf instructors at different levels? Are different fitness instructors at different levels? Are different teachers in school at different levels? The answer is, of course. You want to find somebody good. You want to find somebody reputable. You want to ask around. You want to get some recommendations. Of course. Of course. All of those things combined. But you're always going to be better off with good help as opposed to no help.
That's a good point, and I think remembering that a trainer isn't a trainer for every person. Like they might be good with a certain population. I saw this a lot. Somebody's really good with kids in high school sports. Not me. That wasn't me. I would have parents ask me, it's like, no, this is your person over here. I worked really well with people 50 and up, people with coming to me as beginners, or they used to be active and they'd gotten away from it, or they're recovering from injuries. That was more my arena. So I think understanding who, if you're hiring a trainer, what is the population they work with?
Very important. You're right. So many times that trainer will have somebody who's 65 years of age who's not in shape and never exercised jumping up and down off a box.
I know, I've seen it.
No, it's ripe for injury. In fact, that
Hmm.
person will get injured at some point. And of course, not only will they get injured and lose the time and the pain from that, but also too, it'll turn them off of something that they so desperately need. So you do have to be careful. And that is a very good point that you made, Carol. Make sure that the person that you're going to see is somebody that is appropriate for you.
Agreed. Now, do you see a difference? You train both men and women, and you had told me prior to us starting the interview that really most of your clients are women. What differences do you see in training them? Are there differences? Do you have to take a different approach?
Women are more advanced. Psychologically, they are more, I'm saying it right now. Yeah, they're more advanced psychologically. They're more mature psychologically. It's funny. I'm teasing men right now. Without question, and I mentioned this before we were talking, that women in general are more forward thinking for their health, more forward thinking for their appearance. It's something that's more top of mind to them, where men, I'm not going to necessarily just say they don't care, but fewer of them necessarily do care about their appearance or health. Some do, many do, but not all of them. So, yes, we have over the last 30 years worked with more females than males. Is there a difference in the principles? No. Is there a difference in the nuances? Of course. We're dealing with somebody, a female is going to have less metabolism because they're going to have less muscle tissue. So if we're comparing, a woman might say, I don't understand. I have to work twice as hard as my husband or somebody else, and I can't lose anything. And I just look at a piece of cheesecake and I gain 2 pounds. Yes, you have less metabolism because you have less skeletal muscle than a man does. It's not a fair comparison. You're going to have to work a little bit harder. I know that doesn't sound awesome, but keep in mind, just like in school, maybe you had a friend that didn't have to study much and they got straight A's, and maybe that was you. Or on the other side, maybe you had to work really, really, really hard and really push and be persistent, and you were then able to eke out good grades. And that's kind of where most women fall. They do have to work harder than their male counterparts to get the same type of grades. Now, that being said, psychologically and mindset, I think women are usually more determined and set to handle it. So I do see that as a benefit. So benefit for man, more metabolism. Benefit for woman, better mindset. And take the two and combine them, and boom, you're going to get some results no matter what your gender is.
No, very well put. I saw the same thing. I found my male clients to be a little stubborn. I don't like saying that, but uh, I would make suggestions and they would want to do it their way, which wasn't always the safest or the best way. A little bit of ego would get in there, where the women were like, show me what, I want to learn.
Yeah, there certainly can be compliance too. And once again, not to necessarily pit one against the other. My whole approach is male or female. I want to try to get them doing the right thing as much as possible. But there are nuances without a doubt between the two. And then when you look at nutrition, same type of thing. They tend to go towards different things. I see a lot of men looking for the carbohydrate from the breads, from the crackers, from subs, from pizza. Women, I see getting into more of the chocolates, more of the alcohols, more of the sugars, more of the nut butters, peanut butter, almond butter, having a whipped topping, things like that that typically wouldn't interest men. So you have to look at all of that because they are going to have different tendencies.
I would agree with that. It's funny, women will come to me and they'll often think carbs are their issue. But then when we start doing a food diary or tracking a little bit, it's the fats. It is the nuts and the creamy things. And then of course carbohydrates in the form of the simple sugars, but I see the same thing. And with myself, I would rather sit and eat peanut butter than I would to have a bag of chips or cookies. I don't know what that is, but that is a weakness.
It's a female thing. So I can't emphasize that enough. Never have I heard a man say, I just got a spoon in almond butter and just sat in front of the TV and ate it. Never have I heard that, but I hear it a lot with women.
Hmm.
The texture, there's something about it. So yes, it is a little nuance between their selections, their different selections at different times, and it can be quite fun. So as a nutritionist, it's always trying to see what they're going to tend towards, what is their trigger points, and we have a good feeling and a good history of what people are going to do.
It's funny. I'm laughing because I remember my first bodybuilding show. Afterwards, you deprive yourself. So then you want all of the things coming off of the show. And somebody brought me these homemade, like Nutter Butters. It was almost like a Reese's, but they were homemade. And I'm like, I'm only going to have one. Well, I stood in the garage and like ate the whole container by myself. And it wasn't so much the sweet for me. Once again, it was that nut butter that was in the center of them.
So highly, once again, I'm not pitting men against women, but so highly female. The peanut butters, the nut butters, anything like in a container you could just sit in front of the TV and eat or something like that, is going to be very female based.
Now, how important do you think, and I'm really shifting gears here, but how important do you think are the hormonal cycles that women go through, like the perimenopause, menopause, the wild, perimenopause ride of estrogens up, estrogens down, and then everything's in the tank with menopause? How does that affect the way you approach their diet and exercise?
Yeah, so my analogy before of everything's kind of on a continuum. Some kids never had to study and they got great grades. Some kids, they could study all day long and they'll never get good grades. And most of us are somewhere in between. I kind of see the same thing too with what you just described as the mixture of hormones too. So for women in general, they're going to have to work harder because they're overcoming these hormones that men don't have to overcome. And it can cause psychological differences as well in terms of dopamine receptors and what you're craving or feeling at different times. So that does make it harder for women, but now I'm going to switch gears and say, but I already mentioned that women in general are more mature. They're better able to handle mindset than a lot of the men can. So I do think so everything has this pro and a con, right? So women have a greater capacity to be able to handle it, but it's going to be harder. Men have less capacity to handle it, but it's going to be easier, and vice versa with the strength training. So it's this great mixture. And when you really break it all down, it puts us all on a pretty level playing field. There's pros over here, there's cons over here, but when you add up the tally and the scores, they do kind of equal out. You just have to see what the topic is that we're talking about.
I would agree. Sometimes I feel like men get the short end of the stick, especially right now with all of the emphasis on menopause, which is good. People are having the conversations. But I know I look at my husband, they have their struggles too. They have their things and challenges as they age as well.
Yeah, no doubt about it. Everybody's going to. There's nobody that's going to escape these challenges. But once again, looking at school, it's the same type of thing. You're going to get challenged at every grade. And if you're just in like third grade or fourth grade, you're going to think, boy, it's so difficult this year. Yes. And guess what? Next year, you're going to say to yourself, it's so difficult next year. It's going to be challenged at every grade level that you're at. And that's a good thing because that's ultimately how you grow. So you can't grow in anything, whether it's school, whether it's your muscle tissue, whether it's your diet, whether it's your mindset, whether it's your career, whether it's you as an individual and your growth of self. None of it is going to grow without these challenges. So lean upon it not as something that's giving you a hard time. Lean upon it as something that's molding you, that's helping you. It's making you a better version of yourself, and that's how you grow.
So good. Because I'm always talking to my clients about, what I did at 40, I wasn't doing at 50. I had to pivot. And then now in my 60s, I had to pivot again. What was working a decade ago, not working quite as well. So I've got to approach things a little bit differently. And it's ever evolving. It's never static.
Nor should it be. You would never want college to feel like middle school. So it's going to change. And then also, too, we are learning things and there are technology changes over time. As an example of that is, for 10 years, I would measure my blood sugar 5 times a day using the good old-fashioned finger stick and putting it up against the glucometer. Just because I was always trying to figure out what my blood sugar was doing based upon what I was eating. Now, I'm not diabetic, but I did it just because A, I wanted to stay lean myself, and B, I teach this for a living. Then became the wearables. You could get a CGM or continuous glucose monitor. So technology did give us an evolution where that habit of just measuring blood glucose didn't have to be done all the time. I could just glance down at my phone and see what it is at any 24-hour period, which is fantastic. So we're using technology on top of the fact that we are aging and hopefully psychologically we're learning. When you put it all together, it's this constantly changing playing field, which once again, don't see it as a negative, see it as this wonderful positive in terms of how you could grow individually.
And a colleague of mine, I always bring her up, and a friend, she will say, get curious. And I wore a CGM for a while because I was curious. I wanted to see what happens when I exercise, what happens when I eat this. And I would experiment a little bit and actually even worked with a dietitian through that process, all through my phone. So love the wearables. And I think, yeah, just keep getting curious, keep learning, seeing it as a positive rather than a negative.
As individuals, we are curious. Now, you could choose your curious, though. So you're choosing the curious that will help you. You're looking at your nutrition, you're looking at your fitness, you're looking at your blood glucose. All very curious. You can be curious about television, you could be curious about social media, you could be, and people are. So you could pick your curious, or as I've heard before, as humans, we're addictive. That we can't stop, but you could choose what that addictive is. You can be addictive about your schoolwork, which is a positive. You could be addictive about your health, your fitness, your nutrition, or you can be addictive about bad behaviors too. So pick your curious, pick your addictive, and hopefully it will serve you.
Great advice. Great advice. Now, as we start to wrap up, I want to be respectful of your time, Dr. Derek. Was there something I didn't ask you, first of all? And second of all, how can the listeners learn more about your products, what you do, and follow you?
Yeah, so our website for our food company is Strength Genesis. You can find it at strengthgenesis.com. We touched on a couple different products that we offer, such as the cold pressed macadamia nut oil, which obviously I talked a lot about because I believe as though if anybody uses it, it will be your favorite oil, hands down. And I did mention our Origin salad dressing that's been very popular, but we have a lot of products on there. We have New Zealand grass-fed protein. We have high-octane MCT oil. We have creatine in sugar-free chews. All of these awesome products that are designed to help a person drop body fat, improve cognitive function, help develop more muscle tissue at any age. And lastly, everything that we do in sustainable packaging. When is the last time that you saw protein powder that wasn't in big, obnoxious plastic containers?
Yes.
Right? So we don't want plastic in our body. Plastic is a petroleum byproduct. It will change your estrogen levels. It will give you microplastic in your blood. It's not good for your brain. It's terrible for the planet and the landfills too. So all of these things we don't want. We package things in aluminum, glass, or paper because it is certainly better for the body and it's better for the planet too. So everything like that and more at strengthgenesis.com.
That's huge. I'm continually having a struggle with the two men in my household, my husband and my son, with the plastic. We go round and round. And not only do they have the plastic, but heating it in the microwave and all the things. And I'm running around like throwing it away. So I love that, the packaging. So thank you so much, Dr. Derek. This has been a delightful conversation. I've learned some things. I know that people watching and listening have as well. So thank you so much for being on the show.
Carol, my pleasure. This was a lot of fun today, and I really enjoyed getting into these topics. You were great.
Thank you. Thank you so much. And to our listeners, wherever you are in the world, we wish you every blessing. Bye for now.